Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto 2 Blue Vortex speculation video. This one's going to be ahead of chapter 23, which is coming out, I believe, on the 19th. It's out this month. Either way, 19th, 20th, it's out in about a week. So we have the first official preview page, so we're in the kind of zone where I usually like to do these previews. I didn't do them for the last couple of chapters just because the timing was bad in relation to other stuff. Of course, I'm Avatar primarily on the channel, and just Avatar stuff was happening at the time I would usually do these videos, and that's the only reason that they didn't happen. I'm still doing them, as you can see here. So as usual, we'll go through some of the stuff from chapter 22 just to kind of highlight where we're at in the story right now ahead of what's about to happen for 23. So of course we got this really interesting point, which is just in terms of the logistics of like what's actually happening in the story. What are our heroes trying to accomplish? Of course, Ryu and Matsuri have been destroyed. Konohamaru literally has Matsuri's soul thorn bulb in his hand, and Mitsuki and Araya are right next to Ryu's soul thorn bulb. But they don't really have it, quote unquote, but it's like, he's gonna pick it up, right? But that just highlights that probably that was a weakness, I think, in the last chapter, is that they probably should have had a little bit more content with Mitsuki and Araya, just to kind of highlight, hey, we're still keeping track of this story. Someone probably should have grabbed the bulb out of the sky. I'm assuming they're going to get it because, like, they can just jump up and get it if they have to. But they have to fill us in on a few things here, because this is a thing I'm getting a little bit frustrated with the manga, is that if you read a chapter or two ago, Kashin Koji, Boruto, and Ada talked about Yodo as if she was dead, but it was on the basis of like, oh yeah, in a bunch of different kind of timelines of events, she dies, like it's a necessary sacrifice for this to play out in this way. But I get no impression from the actual characters next to Yodo that she's actually dead. Like, they haven't really addressed that or said it yet. So I'm assuming she's just very, very badly injured and will die if nothing happens to attempt to heal her. Now, how exactly is that going to happen given the circumstances? I'm not sure, but I'm running with the idea that Yodo isn't confirmed fully dead just yet. Of course, we have Sarada, who is still knocked out from using the Mangekyo Sharingan, but I'm guessing she'll be able to get back up shortly. And so it's not just going to be out of action for good, but at least the next action is going to have to be Mitsuki and Araya doing stuff here, of course. The big thing from the last chapter, like, is actually big for the series full stop, of course, was Jura confronting Boruto, who of course interfered to destroy Matsuri to save Konohamaru. Which was exactly what Kashin Koji warned him not to do, because it would bring Jura into play. They wanted to deal with everyone else and then deal with Jura on his own, whereas Boruto's kind of accelerated things in this happening. We got quite a bit of a fight, but of course it was mostly just the basics, and we'll get to the kind of key point in a second. But yeah, Kashin Koji feels Boruto is done for here with the way things are expected to play out. He cannot win, and the chapter also explains why he can't really escape. One, it will be a hard time for him to concentrate on the technique enough to get out of there, but also him escaping doesn't accomplish what he wants to accomplish. Saves his life, but probably gets the people he wants to save killed. So he can't really escape. He has to engage Jura here. So Boruto is in a really, really tough situation, which is part of the cliffhanger ending. The actual cliffhanger ending is that Boruto does manage to hit Jura with the Uzuhiko kind of Rasengan. But Jura immediately counters it, kind of nullifying it, because apparently the principles of the Uzuhiko are similar to the Biju bombs. Now, again, the logic behind that, again, is if you've read the Minato one-shot manga, we know that the Rasengan itself is based on the Biju bomb. But again, it's based on it in the sense of visually they're kind of referencing each other's kind of spiraling energy type thing. But I'm not quite sure how it's like, because that's the case, Jura is just able to counter this crazy enhanced fancy technique that Boruto has developed that uses the kind of rotation of the planet to kind of do its kind of effect? Are they trying to say that, well, the Biju bomb also has a connection to the planet in some way, so we can counter it that way? Or is it literally just because they're all effectively spiraling chakra energy techniques that's the counter? I definitely want an explanation beyond just that, oh, principles are the same. I already explained it. Now, I want a little bit more depth than kind of just saying that, like, oh yeah, it doesn't work on me here. So the idea is, if Boruto's best move doesn't work on Jura, then what can he do? He's helpless in this situation. But we of course know that there's a bunch of situations that can happen. Some of them are very expected. It's just about which one is going to get activated kind of coming up next. So again, lots of big stuff happening. This is the thing I always maintain with Boruto. Even though I didn't think chapter 22 was like amazing, I thought it wasted a lot of its page count on kind of the kind of dull parts of a fight. They could have focused, I think, more on this side of the plot, just to highlight what's going on, give updates on like Yodo and stuff like that. But it's still interesting because, again, it's apparently 2 of the Divine Tree characters are taken out, and 2 opportunities to free characters from trees. We have to see exactly how that's going to happen. They seem to set up the idea that Konohamaru is going to try and reunite with the others, so they're going to have 2 Soul Thorn bulbs together, and we'll see where they go from there. Obviously, the tree with Shinki is much closer than, I guess, the Moegi one, so that would be the obvious next kind of step in the process. But there's that, and then of course the current main villain is facing off against the main hero. That's a big thing, just in terms of we're finally hitting a big kind of milestone in a way in this arc. But let's get into speculation about kind of stuff that's probably likely to happen. Again, we did get the preview page, so this is from the official Naruto website. So you can see here, the preview page is a bit of action here, where obviously, despite the Uzuhiko not working, the fight does continue. Boruto goes in, he does a jutsu as he's grabbed by Jura. This is a purple lightning, so we've seen this technique before, of course. He seems to surprise Jura with this. You can sort of see, I guess it's the fact that he's doing a jutsu while holding a sword while being caught is maybe the really surprise skill move here. He zaps him with the purple lightning, which again is meant to be like for Kakashi, like a Chidori replacement. So it's this is not gonna really hurt Jura ultimately, but he seems quite surprised by this overall. And again, I wonder, is it just a very skillful move from Boruto, or does Boruto like teleport immediately after hitting him with the lightning or something like that? Because you can see here he was holding onto his wrist, but now he's gone. So he obviously teleports away in some way. They explained in the previous chapter that he couldn't just teleport away from the fight completely and wouldn't want to. So he's obviously just teleported like close by, which I guess is the kind of counterpoint to that to keep the fight going. And it's probably just Jura maybe a bit frustrated that he can't deal with such a tricky opponent and fully finish the job. That's probably going to be the idea. But the fight continues. It's not just going to be we open up the chapter, Jura walks away. No, part of the chapter is going to be at least partial fight between these two. But I think I'm going into the chapter fully expecting someone or something to enter the battlefield to change the dynamic here, that it's actually now going to be a fight, or it will force a retreat, a reset, and we'll see where we go from there. So first up is, of course, Kawaki and Amado, who, as far as I could tell, were last seen in chapter 18, which again, we're going into 23. So it's been like a full volume since the last time Kawaki was there. And that's getting very noticeable with the absence of the character. Because again, he went to Amado with a very simple task. Get Amado to basically switch his power from kind of full-on defense to full-on offense, so he can actually be a threat to their opponents. And he basically, even though Amado kind of has an advantage to a certain degree, being able to control people to a certain degree, Kawaki was like, no, I will help you with your daughter after we're done with the Otsutsukis. That comes first. And so the setup feels like it's all there for, yeah, Kawaki is going to appear somewhere with the powers, and he will turn the tides, and I'm guessing it's going to happen off screen. I'd be very surprised if we just had the next time we see them, it's Amado working on Kawaki activating this power. I think it will just happen off screen, and he's going to suddenly show up and turn the tides. That's my guess. And the very obvious one, just because I think if they were doing it more normal, they wouldn't have the character go missing for like 4 chapters. Going on 5, if, of course he doesn't appear in this one, so interesting. Next, of course, this is probably the big one. Boruto is being pushed for the first real time into Blue Vortex, given how skillful he is and is more than a match for anyone he's encountered so far. But of course, Jura is the character who he said that he's not going to be able to defeat on his own. So when he's pushed, is this going to prompt Momoshiki to come to the surface for the first time into Blue Vortex? Because again, we've only really addressed Momoshiki at one opportunity in to Blue Vortex, really, and that is chapter 15, where Boruto explains to Kawaki that Momo has been quiet for the last 3 years, since, of course, the sort of code incident that happened in the kind of time skip between series, which was the last time Boruto had a big sort of karma kind of flare up and Momoshiki kind of threatened things. Of course, the dynamic we have is that he feels if he ever uses the karma, that this will create a situation where Momo is very likely to emerge. It seems to give Momo the kind of opportunity to take control. And we're just in a situation in the series where I think we're just desperate for an update on this situation. What is Momoshiki Otsutsuki inside of Boruto thinking about everything that's happening? It's been years now. Why is he not trying to manipulate Boruto in some way? Is he staying quiet for some other reason? Is he on Boruto's side now? Is he just fine with being in the position that he's in, helping Boruto to do whatever because, hey, if Boruto's alive, he's maybe accepted that this is all he can get out of this? Because you're kind of thinking, like, what is the end game with Momoshiki in all of this? And it is that sort of idea of, like, is this meant to be this show's kind of version of a Kurama-like thing, where in this case it's an Otsutsuki inside Boruto rather than the tail beast inside Naruto, and they're really going to get into this. My guess probably would be that we find some way where he will work with Boruto, but there's still tension there. Especially thinking more into the future of the series, like if we are going to go from the Divine Tree characters into the fight with Kawaki next, after that, or maybe in the middle of all of that, there is still what I think, say, Kawaki is a little bit misguided on, which is that the only Otsutsukis aren't the ones on your list. What about the clan that is out there that is clearly not going to take it, like, just sitting down, that they keep getting repelled from this planet? What about the high-ups, the main branch of the Otsutsuki family, the leaders of the Otsutsuki clan? And it kind of feels like we need to get into that a little bit more. We need to get into Shibai Otsutsuki, the god Otsutsuki, all the sort of stuff happening in that regard. And Momoshiki, I guess, would know at least some stuff about that. He can be our guide to the Otsutsukis as the maybe series enters more of a lore focus, kind of focus on really addressing the kind of alien element of the franchise that has been there, of course, since like Naruto Shippuden. But that's more thinking well into the future of the series, that we need to get, you know, Otsutsuki stuff. Because that is the thing with Kawaki, is that he's very focused on, okay, take out all these Divine Tree characters. He kind of views himself to a certain degree as an Otsutsuki entity. Boruto, because Momoshiki's inside of him, an Otsutsuki. But not thinking about the kind of bigger picture in all of this as well. So that's interesting. So yeah, this is going to be interesting because also we know Boruto will use karma in the future, because the setup for the Kawaki fight is Boruto using karma, activating it on his own. So how do we get from Boruto kind of almost terrified to use karma at all to him actively using it? And it feels like we have to have him kind of forced to tackle it, forced to use it, forced to actually address, like, no, you're speculating to a certain degree, but what actually happens with the dynamic of all of these things. We could probably throw the Jogan in here to a certain degree if you want to. No clue what's really going on with it, but apparently it's a thing. And if they do need a thing that is kind of set up that can turn the tides for Boruto, well, the Jogan is certainly the thing to counter the influence of the Karma and Momoshiki, I think, to give Boruto the destiny, I suppose, that he needs. So there's that. I do wonder when it comes to someone else, like say Kashin Koji, is him interfering an option kind of as we maybe go forward? They seem to be really highlighting in the series that like Boruto is being really careful not to out who he's kind of working for, who he's getting information from. So Kashin Koji, I suppose it's mainly the enemy becoming aware of his power to see the specific branches of the future. And again, that idea of the people who know about that and the kind of options that they have to then avert certain futures because they're aware that certain futures are a possibility, and that whole idea that was explained a bunch of chapters ago. So that's the key reason for, I suppose, Kashin Koji staying in the background. But if he absolutely has to, he can step out onto the battlefield and be a threat if he needs to. But is it the time for that right now? I'm not sure. He's the one who obviously knows all the different pathways. So is there a pathway that he sees where, well, we can still win even if Boruto gets taken out in this specific instance? But it's complicated because, of course, if any of the Tail Beast characters eat Boruto, then that is a divine tree. And that's a planet-consuming thing. And that is endgame for the series, you know. So Boruto kind of can't lose because of that, so Kashin Koji would have to kind of jump in that case. So there's that whole idea. I do think this is an important topic to bring up as well with this, in terms of just in this arc with the Divine Tree characters. How far in are we? Obviously, it is our main villain against our main hero. But is this the fight? It might take a bunch of chapters to eventually get to the end of it or whatever. But are we in what is effectively the final fight? Or is something going to happen? Are we going to break this up and the fight will happen in a different circumstance in a little bit of time? We build up to it a little bit more. Or are we here right now? I feel we're setting up for probably a break. That's my guess, is that I'd be very surprised if we can really form what we're doing right now into the end game of the fight, just because it feels like there's a lot of characters resting who are kind of unconscious at the moment, who probably need to be involved in the final fight, and it's maybe pushing things a little bit to have them get back up and going very, very quickly. So the simple point would just be Kawaki enters the battlefield and they force a retreat somehow against Jura. And we are then able to set up the remaining Divine Tree characters against all the relevant characters from more of a character perspective with each of them, what's happening. Because, notably, Hidari and Mamushi are not really involved in the events happening currently. We haven't really done a lot of setup for the Mamushi kind of targeting Ada situation. They've referenced it a couple of times, but it's been a while. We assume that's going to be mainly, I suppose, Demon against Mamushi, with Ada kind of involved there and thereabouts. But there's no setup for that just yet recently. Similarly, Hidari, we assume Sarada is going to be involved in the fight against the guy who looks like her father, and that's going to be like the notable fight there. But she's unconscious at the moment, and we have to, again, build that up a little bit more. But they're not quite there yet. And that's why I kind of feel that, like, there's no way we're killing Jura now, with, like, dealing with that, having that fight happen. And we have enough time to turn this into Sarada getting up and immediately fighting another one of these characters again. Obviously, her powers, like how crazy powerful her Mangekyo Sharingan ability is, allows her to defeat these characters. But it would be kind of quite quick back to back. And that's the question. Are we, on the other side of things, like I mentioned at the start, are we fully defeating Ryu and or Matsuri right now? As in, those soul thorn bulbs are getting delivered back to the trees. The character is freed, and we assume the new Divine Tree entity fully defeated. It can't be reborn again. Are we defeating one or both of them now? That's the situation that we kind of have. Like I explained, Konohamaru's literally holding the Matsuri kind of Moegi Soul Thorn bulb. The Ryu one is right there, but Mitsuki's not holding it just yet. But they're right there. The Ryu kind of feels like the more obvious pick to actually like take him out, just so we're, I suppose, quote unquote, wrapping up the sand arc that we've been doing for a while now, in terms of like we're right there, we're much closer to it. He's the newer Divine Tree character, the one that was introduced after the initial four, so it makes sense that the younger one is the one who maybe gets defeated initially. And also, I think there's a little bit more kind of precariousness to the whole Shinki Gaara situation, because like Gaara was more borderline kind of fatally wounded at the same time as all this happened. He's injured, he's contained in Shinki's ceiling, Shinki's in the tree. Like, fixing this kind of opens the door for a few more characters versus just, you know, what feels like this can happen a little bit later. The emotional moment of kind of Moegi kind of coming back into play. And I'm guessing finally like maybe addressing the Konohamaru Moegi stuff in terms of like, again, the Matsuri stuff, the connection there, that clearly comes because of the Moegi stuff. So are we going to address the romance there? And are we doing that now or later? And that's kind of the thoughts there. Plus, on the kind of Matsuri Moegi situation, I kind of feel that, like, surely you have to involve, like, Inojin, Moegi's team, Konohamaru again, having the proper fight. Because it feels maybe a little bit kind of, just in terms of who actually got the win, a little bit unfair that kind of Boruto just came in and just obliterated her. Whereas at least Sarada got the big win on the other side of things, and you probably should keep that as a clear win for Sarada, you know, showing off her big technique for the first time. Whereas it feels like the setup is actually there for Konohamaru Matsuri is actually this really interesting, tense, emotional dynamic where they probably both have reason to say different things to each other when they kind of, if they ever confront each other again. Plus, Konohamaru actually just fighting against her rather than the more subterfuge kind of manipulation dynamic that was going on before. Konohamaru gets to show himself off a little bit more. Plus, you get Moegi's team, Inoshige-cho of this generation, showing themselves off as well. And I think that could be a very cool fight. That's just my thoughts on it. If they don't have time for that, because this series does at times have the tendency to accelerate quite quickly, we could just be done with these two right here. Well, that we actually do free everyone here, and it leaves us with just the remaining, I guess, 3 characters. So like I said, Hidari, Mamushi, and Jura to defeat, to get out of the way. But if they want to stick with this for a little bit longer, I think the setup is there for Matsuri to be reborn, and then finally we defeat her again in more typical circumstances, because we don't want Boruto just being the one to take out like all of these characters. The whole, each of them has a target based on the character that they're kind of based off, that they captured in the tree. It feels a bit weird that Boruto's the answer to all those questions, of course. So that's that. Now, again, you can maybe make the point of like, but Sarada defeated the one that was more connected to the sand characters, and that's just where you maybe have to accept that, like, unfortunately, with Shinki trapped, Yodo and Araya are ultimately secondary characters, and I don't think they were ever really going to give the win to either of those two, unfortunately, so it had to be more of a team up with the main characters, one of them gets to do it, and Sarada makes complete sense. So there's that. Final speculation here is just that, what if Himawari showed up? Perfect for distraction, because apparently Jura's target, it's either Naruto or Himawari. I'm still unclear on if that kind of reveal when it happened was, oh, we are meant to just assume it was him misinterpreting that, like, no, it's specifically Naruto, or actually no, it's Himawari, because she is the only sort of active source of the energy, tail beast energy, that he's after, and that is Himawari. I think that's the intent, is that Himawari is his target. So yeah, if Jura's focused on taking out Boruto here, Himawari is the true proper distraction that you can actually kind of have in that way. But again, have we done the setup with Himawari well enough that that's going to mean anything? It feels like she needs to have a little bit of time to herself to maybe talk to the Nine Tails a bit more, to train a little bit, so that she can actually be a threat or more of a use in a fight. And of course, Himawari trying to save Boruto in the middle of a fight, of course, is a pretty nice dynamic as well. So there's options here. There actually is a lot of things that are wide open. I do think the very obvious one is Kawaki, just because, like I said, it's so noticeable. He's not been in the series for a full volume now. So he has to come back into play at some point. The setup is so clearly there. He's expecting this guy to give him a power boost. We've cut off screen for a really long amount of time. What do we think is going to happen? And that obviously has to be the case. So that's pretty much everything here. But yeah, my expectations for the chapter itself obviously are, I hope they don't spend too much of it again on, you know, punch kick, you know, fighting where we're maybe not doing all that much. I hope we keep it kind of focused to the point and don't wait too long to build up to whatever we're doing next. That said, I think this manga does typically have the pacing of, if Kawaki shows up, it probably is going to be at the end of a volume. But I'm like, can you really have a whole chapter again that's just these two fighting without anything else happening before that? Now, this is maybe where we can do an interesting chapter, like I'm kind of suggesting, that what if we focus maybe half, 3/4 of the chapter on Konohamaru meeting up with the others, just catching us up on stuff like, hey, is Yodo dead? What, you know, is Sarada going to wake up? What do we do with the group that should have 2 Soul Thorn bulbs in hand? What are they actually planning to do? That would be nice to get. That would certainly fill up a lot of time, rather than potentially, quote unquote, wasting it on the maybe filler stages of a fight before we're properly ready. And again, I don't expect a Kawaki or a Himawari to show up midway through the chapter. That is absolutely a volume kind of, a chapter ending kind of thing that they typically do. And again, chapter 23 is going to be 3 of 4 for a volume. It's not a volume ending one. That will be next time out. So that would that I think would make sense, that you end the 3rd chapter in the volume with the arrival of the character, to allow the final chapter of the volume to be, and here we get to see Kawaki really do some stuff to set up the next phase of the story, or like what we're doing next. So we're in a good spot for Boruto. There's always a little bit of a hit and miss nature with the chapters, just on the basis of how much significant content we actually get from our monthly chapters. I didn't think chapter 22 delivered that much, and I would hope that this one has a little bit more to it. But there we go. That's the speculation video. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 23. What do you think is going to happen? And probably the big speculation point, what is going to be the factor that prevents, I suppose, this from just being Boruto versus Juro one-on-one? Who's going to interfere? Is it Kawaki, Himawari, Kashin Koji, or something else? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.